Daisy Fay and the Miracle Mann. April the 1st, 1952. Hello there, my name is Daisy Fay Harper, and I was 11 years old yesterday. My grandmother Pettibone won the jackpot at the VFW bingo game and bought me a typewriter for my birthday. She wants me to practice typing so when I grow up I can be a secretary, but my cat Felix, who's pregnant, threw up on it and ruined it, which is okay with me. I don't know what's the matter with Grandma. I've told her 100 times I want to be a tree surgeon, or maybe a blacksmith. I got a Red Ryder BB gun from Daddy and some Jansen mix and match outfits Mama bought me at the Smart and Sassy shop. Ugh. I'm an only child, and I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and as far as me being a girl, it was just fine because my daddy wanted a little girl. Daddy says that everybody in history has a twin, and that he and Mr. Harry Truman could be equals in history. Daddy and Mr. Truman both wear glasses, have a daughter, and are Democrats. Mama says he isn't anything like Harry Truman at all. Mr. Truman's little girl is named Margaret. I got stuck with Daisy Fay. Mama wanted to name me Mignon after her sister, but Daddy pitched a fit and said he didn't want his only daughter named after a steak. He was making such a commotion, and the woman with the birth certificate was tired of waiting, so Grandma Pettibone settled the whole thing by naming me Daisy just because there happened to be a vase of daisies in the room. I sure would love to know who sent those rotten daisies anyway. Daddy and I just hate that name because it sounds country, and we are not country at all. Jackson is a big city, and we live in an apartment. Mama and Daddy are fighting all the time now. Last week, an Army Air Force buddy of Daddy's named Jimmy Snow called and told him that if he could get $500, Daddy could buy a half interest in a malt shop in Shell Beach, Mississippi, and make a fortune. Jimmy won half interest in the malt shop in a poker game and needs $500 to get the other half. He's a crop duster, so Daddy could run the whole thing, and he would just be a silent partner. I hope Daddy gets the money. He's busy working on his new invention now. He has an English redworm bed in the backyard, and as soon as they grow, he's going to freeze them and sell them all over the country for fish bait. April the 2nd. Guess what? I saw the kittens being born. I'm never going to have any children. My daddy is a motion picture machine operator, and so is his daddy. As a matter of fact, I come from a show business family. Even my mother once was a movie cashier. Right after the Army, Daddy worked at the Woodlawn Theater, and I spent every Saturday and Sunday in the projection booth in the balcony where colored people used to sit before they got smart and opened up their own movie houses. After that, white people wouldn't go up there, which suited me just fine because I had the whole balcony to myself. Mama says that sitting in that balcony looking down on people has given me a superiority complex. Maybe so, but Daddy didn't want me downstairs where some child molester might sit down by me and then Daddy would have to kill him. The Woodlawn Theater ran weekly serials, Buster Crab, the Green Hornet, and Jungle Jim, but my favorite is Nyoka, the Jungle Girl. Nyoka has a lot to do with how I look in person. Daddy spent a whole day making me a swing rope on a tree in the backyard, but unfortunately he made an error in dynamics, as he put it. I grabbed a hold of the rope, and he ran me back as far as he could, and he let go, and it swung me right into the tree, and now my right front tooth is chipped. Daddy thinks it makes me look different. Mama thinks it's awful. What I can't figure out is, Felix is a calico cat, and her kittens are black and white and real ugly. April the 12th. Well, you're not going to believe what happened. Daddy froze 5 cartons of English redworms, and when we thawed them out, they were all dead as doornails, or rats. Jimmy Snow called Daddy and asked if he had the $500 yet, and I got to talk to him, and he sounds very nice. Now Daddy has decided to try to get on the TV show I've Got a Secret to win the money. May the 6th. Last night was the night of the biggest bingo game in town. The East Lake VFW was giving away $500 for the jackpot. Grandma Pettibone played 32 cards with the lucky number I picked, I-29 on them. But guess what? It was my mama who hit the jackpot. We are on our way to Shell Beach. May 29th. I am now in Shell Beach, Mississippi, almost 300 miles from Jackson. Wow. We met Jimmy Snow at a filling station 10 miles from the beach, and he gave Daddy the key to the malt shop and wished him good luck. He sure is funny looking. He has snow white hair and snow white eyebrows, and he isn't even old. Shell Beach is about the most beautiful place I have ever seen. The beach has sand white as flour, and the water is green and clear. Daddy's place is located at the end of the road that goes straight to the beach. Even I can tell it's a prime location. The malt shop is terrific. It has 6 booths made out of lime green plastic and 6 tables and chairs to match, and you can see the Gulf of Mexico right out the window. We are living in the back of the malt shop, which is one large room with a sun porch, and Daddy is turning the sun porch into a bedroom for me. Our very first visitors were the Romeos, who live up the road and have an Italian restaurant and about 8 summer cottages. They have a son named Michael, who's visiting his cousins in Jackson, but he'll be back home in about 2 weeks. Mr. Romeo said the only other person down here my age is a girl named K-Bob Benson. Mr. Romeo said that there were only 3 months a year that she could make money here, June, July, and August. The rest of the year, he said, nobody ever comes down here. There are only about 15 people who live in Shell Beach year-round. Even in the summer, there aren't that many people, because everybody wants to go to Florida. The main highway to Florida bypasses Shell Beach by 30 miles. Mama looked at Daddy like she could kill him when she heard that one. We also met Mr. and Mrs. Dudley Dot. They live at the beach, and Mrs. Dot has a club that she wants me to join called the Junior Debutantes Club. It meets in the back of the live bait store to help bring culture to the young ladies of Shell Beach. Mama says I have to go. Mrs. Dot writes a column for the Magnolia Springs paper, and she put us in it. The column is called Dashes from Dot, and it said, Shell Beach has a new family, the William Harpers and their darling daughter Daisy. They've moved from Jackson, Mississippi, and purchased the malt shop at the end of Highway 4. Mr. Harper was previously employed in the finest theaters in Jackson as a master projectionist. We wish them good luck. June the 4th. Jimmy Snow came down to see us the other day and said the place looked great. The reason he hasn't been here sooner was that he was busy crop dusting. After he left, Daddy said that Jimmy was a great guy and got drunk one time and dusted crops in downtown Tupelo. Mama didn't think that was funny, but I do. I finally met K-Bob Benson. I don't think she likes me much. I had to go to her house and look at that dumb collection of dolls that she has in a glass cage. She's real impressed because she has some Madame Alexander dolls. Big deal. I mean, what good are dolls in a glass cage? Daddy and I drove 6 miles up the road to the Bon Secours River. It's surrounded by huge trees with Spanish moss hanging all on them all the way to the ground. The Bon Secours is where the best oysters in the world come from, and Daddy knows a man that sells them in a croaker sack for a quarter. Daddy eats them raw. The man who rents us our boat, Mr. Charles Winsell, lives across the street from some people called the Caldwells. The Caldwells are what Daddy calls Bible thumpers. Crazy over religion. Daddy and I tried to avoid the Caldwells, but they have a daughter who is always sitting on the front porch, and she looks so happy to see us that we wave at her. One day Mr. Winsell said to me, I think she wants you to go over there and talk to her. She's a crippled girl, so she can't come over here. I was surprised at how pretty she was up close. I had never talked to a crippled person before, so I stood behind Daddy, who answered all of her questions about me, how old I was, what grade I was in, and all that stuff. Her name is Betty, and she's been crippled all of her life. She's 18 years old. We need to hire help for the malt shop, so we went up to Beulah Heights, the colored quarters, to look for a dishwasher, and found one named Mattie May. According to Mattie May, there is a real live albino living in Beulah Heights. Her name is Eula Sauer. Nobody knows where she lives, and she's so ugly she would scare you to death. Somebody saw her once in the night picking flowers. Oh, I'd give anything to see her. I love to go to Beulah Heights. I go into the Elite Night Spot for an orange crush. I love the Elite Night Spot. Little colored Christmas lights are all around, and it has a jukebox and everything. I never heard any of the songs before because they are race music from Africa and Chicago. The lady who runs it is named Peachy Wiggum and has gold teeth and lives on a liquid diet. Peachy said I could come and see her any time I wanted and gave me a dead chicken foot for good luck. There's a real nightclub here called the Blue Gardenia Lounge that's going to have live acts. Daddy and I went up to meet the owners, a man named Harper Pistol and his brother Claude. We only met Harold and his wife, though, because Claude is in Detroit. They have a little girl named Angel who is 5. Angel has real big ears that stick way out. When the season starts, Mr. and Mrs. Pistol have promised to pay me 25 cents a night to come up and tape her ears back before she goes to sleep. They'll be busy working in the lounge and can't see to it. I can see all the acts for free, too. June the 6th. Mr. Romeo brought Michael over to meet me, and he's great. He's a junior lifeguard, which will come in handy since I can't swim. He already has a suntan, but it might be his natural color. Yesterday, Connie, the sunshine bread truck man, let Michael and me ride to Cotton Bayou, to a grocery store where he had to deliver bread. Cotton Bayou is way down in the swamps. The people there are Cajun. That means French and something. We drove up to an old white wooden grocery store that was falling down. It had a sign on it, said Cotton Bayou Grocery Store and P.O. Mrs. Legore ran the place, and she's the postmistress. Connie asked if we could see Jessie. Mrs. Legore said for us to wait until she had cleaned him up a little. I wanted to know if Jessie was a person or an animal. Connie said that Jessie was a person about 25 years old who hadn't been out of his room since he was 15 because of elephantitis. I'd never seen anybody with elephantitis, and neither had Michael. I was willing to go back there only if I couldn't catch it. Pretty soon Mrs. Legore came back in. Connie picked out 5 loaves of bread and 3 day-old coconut cakes for Jessie. We went in the back of the store, and there was Jessie, lying on a mattress on the floor with one leg propped up. He must be the fattest man in the world. I couldn't even see his eyes good. He was wearing a flowered shirt without buttons that was fastened together with big safety pins, and he had on what looked to me like pajama bottoms. He was friendly and glad to get the cakes and ate them without a knife or a fork. His room was little, and there was a collection of red and blue satin pillows that said Mother and Sweetheart on them with yellow silk braided fringe all around them. Jessie asked if we wanted to hear him sing. I said I'd love to hear Shrimp Boats Are A-Comin', but he only knows patriotic and religious songs, so he sang something about Jesus. He has a pretty good voice, too. Jessie asked Michael if he was going to marry me when we grew up. I told him my daddy wouldn't let me marry an Italian boy because he didn't want me to work in a grocery store. And Jessie laughed so hard he shook the whole room. Then he started to sweat a lot and asked Connie to put his leg down. His leg was the size of a truck tire and didn't have any knees. June the 30th. The malt shop opened up, and I got so sunburned that my nose almost peeled off. Mama took me to some hillbilly doctor that scared her to death about skin cancer and gave her some white junk out of a Navy survival kit. She mashes that stuff on my face every day. It looks just like lard, and you can't get it off for anything. I'm staying inside most of the daytime because nobody will play with me. I've done every number painting they put out, and that one with the Persian kitten twice. I sent one of them up to that cripple girl Betty Caldwell. I've been making money taping Angel Pistol's ears back before she goes to sleep. Her daddy lets me go into the lounge and have a Coca-Cola and see the acts. The act that's there now is a singer named Sheila Ray. She's famous, too. Her ad says that she has appeared in night spots in Biloxi and Gulfport, Mississippi. She's real skinny and has white hair and black eyebrows. I think she dyes one or the other. Her big number is Tweedledee. She uses a lot of personality in that one. I like her all right, but as far as I'm concerned, nobody can touch Doris Day for singing and personality. I love the acts. The only bad part about going up there is that Claude Pistol, Angel's uncle. He's back from Detroit, and boy, is he mean and ugly. You should see him. Ooh, he has bad skin and greasy hair and pop eyes, a real Peter Lorre type, only taller and skinnier. He hates me. I was up there one night, and I saw a group of men sitting in one of the back rooms playing poker. I went in and asked if I could play a hand or two. They said fine, so I sat down and ordered a Coke. You may not know this, but I happen to be an expert poker player. Daddy taught me all of his tricks. I was just sitting there minding my own business, working on an inside straight, when Claude Pistol came in and picked me up by the back of my shirt and threw me out the door and slammed it right in my face, just when I was winning, too. I told Angel what Claude had done, and she said that Claude hates everybody in the world except her, including her own daddy, and not only that, he carries a gun. Daddy has made some new friends. One is a short, bald man named Billy Bundy, who is a famous radio preacher. Billy got in a lot of trouble once in the Midwest, selling autographed pictures of the Last Supper. Imagine him thinking you could forge Jesus Christ's signature. Another friend of Daddy's is Al the drummer, who plays the drums at the Blue Gardenia Lounge. Mama says he looks like a weasel. The worst thing that happened is that the junior debutantes have started, and I have to go to the meetings with that white stuff on my face. There's nobody good in the club. Just K. Bob Benson and a bunch of shrimpers' daughters that won't talk to me on account of they are real religious and found out that Daddy is a drinker. The first meeting, K. Bob got to stand up and explain the charms on her add-a-charm bracelet. Who cares? All we did is learn to pour tea and curtsy. I already knew how to do that. We have to wear plastic barrettes in our hair with the club colors, seafoam green and oleander pink, and make ashtrays and tea plates out of shells. July the 1st. Mama is definitely not happy with Daddy's actions this summer. The other morning I was witness to one of the greatest temper fits of all times. Daddy hadn't been home all night because he was running up and down the road with Jimmy Snow and Al the drummer. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning when he finally did come home. Mama took one look at him and saw he was still drunk. On top of that, he was wearing somebody else's clothes. All hell broke loose. Daddy explained to Mama that they had all decided to take a swim and had taken their clothes off. Sheila Ray, as a joke, had dug a hole and hid them in the sand, but then couldn't remember where she'd buried them. It was true because we saw Sheila Ray on the beach all day, digging up holes and crying. I haven't been doing much. I go out on the fishing pier and kick the fish back in the water. People ought not to catch fish that they're not going to eat. We don't have Maddie May as a dishwasher anymore. The new dishwasher is a little old skinny woman named Velveeta Pritchard. She's the blackest woman I ever saw. So black she looks blue, which is a sign of royalty among Mississippi colored people. I asked Velveeta if there was an albino living up there in Beulah Heights, and she said no, there wasn't, and it was just a story somebody made up. But I think she was lying. I just know there is an albino up there. I can feel it in my bones. July the 12th. There was a singer at the Blue Gardenia Lounge last week named Ray Lane, and he was real good. He came over to the table and sat down with us for a while. He was real lonesome being down here by himself. I found out he's only 17 years old, and he's from Hattiesburg. He asked me if I could go swimming with him, and I said sure. He's so handsome, and he has curly hair. He has a girlfriend named Ann who wears glasses. He's gone with her for a long time, and he misses her. I sure wish he was my boyfriend. I would never let him go anywhere without me. July the 30th. I am a real bona fide hero. I may get a medal from the VFW. Last Sunday, Michael and Angel and I decided to go fishing in the lagoon. We were sitting in the boat fishing for toadfish so we could blow them up and hang them in our rooms, when all of a sudden Michael jerked the biggest, blackest snake I've ever seen right into the boat. As soon as that snake hit the boat, all three of us jumped into the lagoon. I was so busy yelling at Michael for pulling a snake in the boat, I must have forgotten I don't know how to swim, because I made it to shore in no time. When Michael got there, we looked around, and Angel wasn't anywhere in sight. Then I remembered she couldn't swim either. I was so scared at having to tell her Mama and Daddy that their little girl had drowned that I jumped right back in the water. Michael and I were diving and looking for her, but we couldn't find her anywhere. Finally, I saw her standing on the bottom of the lagoon, and I dove down and went under her and grabbed her feet and pushed her straight up in the air so her head would stick out of the water. Michael saw the top of her head and grabbed her by the ear just in time. Angel was real sick. I never saw anybody throw up so much in my life, and we had leeches all over us, just like Humphrey Bogart and the African Queen. Ooh! We took Angel back up to the Blue Gardenia Lounge and told her Mama and Daddy what had happened. Claude wasn't there, thank goodness. He's crazy about Angel. He probably would have killed Michael and me for almost getting her drowned. At the junior debutantes meeting, I had to stand up and tell how I had saved Angel's life. Mrs. Dot said that I was a natural-born storyteller and very brave on top of that. August the 3rd. I was in the malt shop the other night washing dishes when I discovered that if I stuck my head around the partition and the people in the place saw it was a small child washing those dishes, they were very surprised. Because of my theatrical background, I took advantage of this and pretended I was an orphan that the Harpers had stolen. I told those customers I had been washing dishes for 3 years and that my hands were withering away. Since some of the people were friends of Mom and Daddy and knew I was kidding, I got great laughs, especially when I asked them to contact the men in charge of the child labor laws. Mama saw me and wanted to know what in the world did I think I was doing making such a racket. I guess I got carried away because I put a frying pan at the back of my head and made a halo and said, "Woman, dost thou not know that I must go about my Father's business?" Jesus said it to his mama when she was bothering him at the temple. I got a great laugh from everybody. Mama seemed to think it was funny, too, until the last person was out the door. Then she started after me. I tried to run, but I got cornered on the back porch that leads to where we live. I was wedged in between the Coca-Cola boxes and couldn't move to the right or to the left. She beat the living daylights out of me. Daddy kept saying to her, "Now, Fay, calm down." I embarrassed myself by pleading for mercy, a thing you never know you'll do until the time comes. The boy Jesus didn't get smacked when he said it. Mary just went on home and let him alone. You sure can't trust the Bible for guidance. It came home to me that night that Mama has certainly lost her sense of humor. From now on, I plan to walk softly as far as Mama is concerned. August the 13th. Jesse Legore, the fat boy on Cotton Bayou, died. He sent me a sweetheart pillow because I had made him laugh once. I could have told him some jokes or done my Mario Lanza impersonation. He never hurt anyone. I don't think anyone should have to die. I don't even want to think what my Mama and Daddy would do if I died. Mama said I'm the only reason she is living and that if she didn't have me, she would just take a gun and blow her brains out. She stays with Daddy just so I'll have a father. If it wasn't for me, she would have left him a long time ago. August the 26th. Velveeta told Mama I was at the Blue Gardenia Lounge and had seen a stripper called Tony the Tassel Woman. Nobody in the world knew that but Michael, and he wouldn't tell for nothing because he would get into big trouble for being there himself. The point is, I caught Velveeta red-handed. She's been reading my papers. That's the only way she could have found out. I told Daddy Velveeta had been into my private papers. He asked me what I write about so much. I told him just things that happened. He wanted to know if I ever put things in my papers about him, and I said, "Oh, yes, it's mostly about you." So he went out and bought me a big tin box with a combination lock on it. I don't trust Velveeta as far as I could throw her. I didn't know colored people could read all that well. People who say they're stupid are wrong. With my luck, Velveeta is probably a college graduate posing as a maid. My Mama has private papers. She should have locked them up. I looked in the top of the closet and found a lawyer's paper that told where my daddy was in a paternity suit. I know what that means, too. The woman that sued him was named Billie G. Thweet. I hope it's true. If it is true, that means that I have a brother or a sister out there somewhere. When I get to be on This Is Your Life, maybe they'll come out from behind the curtain and surprise me. I'm dying to ask Daddy who Billie G. Thweet is, but I'm saving that name to use it when I need it. The other night, Peachy Wiggum called Daddy and said for him to come get Jimmy Snow. He was sitting in the Elite Night Spot drunk and wouldn't go home, and her customers don't like white people in their colored nightclub. When we got there, Jimmy'd passed out and Peachy had put him to bed in her back room. It took Daddy and 2 colored men to carry him to the car. The whole time I was back there where Peachy lived, I heard somebody moving around in the other room. Maybe Peachy has a boyfriend living with her. She isn't very pretty, but she's real rich. I bet her boyfriend is just after her money. She sells bootleg whiskey. Besides being real rich, she knows a secret about the white sheriff's daughter, so she never gets arrested like the other coloreds do. Most of her money comes from the colored mortuary she owns, which is the only one in Harwan County. She even has a layaway plan. September the 21st. Mama and Daddy went deep-sea fishing with Mr. and Mrs. Dudley Dot today, but I stayed home because they were afraid I would throw the fish back. I was playing around by myself up by the highway when I saw a car parked to block up the road, and there were 2 people in it kissing and carrying on in broad daylight. Puke. About an hour later they drove up to the malt shop, and I went over to tell them that we were closed. And guess who was in that car? Claude Pistol. I almost fainted. But he must have forgotten he hated me, because he asked me if I would let his friend Ruby use our bathroom. She has long brown hair and isn't bad looking, but she must be pretty hard up to go out with someone as ugly as Claude Pistol. After she finished with the bathroom, she decided to comb her hair and put on some lipstick. I figure she's pretty rich, because she had on the biggest, reddest ruby ring I'd ever seen. I asked her if it was a real ruby, and she said it was. She told me that her name was Ruby Bates, and that she had a twin sister named Opal. Her daddy had given her that ring and gave Opal a big opal ring when they were both 21 years old. Ruby asked me what my name was, and I told her Daisy Fay Harper. She acted as though that was the funniest name she'd ever heard and about laughed her head off. I told her it wasn't my fault that I was named for a vase of flowers that happened to be in my mother's room. Now that I think about it, I don't think being named after a vase of flowers is any funnier than being named after a ring. September 22nd. Jimmy Snow came down to see us, and Daddy had to tell him that he didn't have his half of the payment on the malt shop. Jimmy said that was okay. He didn't have his half either. He's a great guy. Mama is just worried to death, but Daddy said he would figure out something. September the 30th. School has started, and am I glad. All Mama and Daddy do is fight, fight, fight. I usually don't like school, but this year I'm crazy about my teacher. Her name is Mrs. Sybil Underwood, and she's beautiful, a real Jean Turney type. The school work is real easy compared to the school I came from. I won't even have to do homework. But I'm having a very hard time with shyness. Mrs. Underwood winked at me once, and I turned so red that I had to put my head down on the desk. It's terrible to have light skin that shows you when you blush. I don't know what's the matter with me. If she calls on me to read out loud, I think I'm going to die. October the 21st. I've been in school 3 weeks now and still can't look at Mrs. Underwood. I'm liable to get a double chin from looking down so much. She gave us a reading test, and I made the highest score, though. I am only in the 6th grade, and I'm already reading at 9th grade level, so I figure I can just coast until I hit the 9th grade. Mama is mad at me. She doesn't pack me a lunch to take to school because she says it's very important that children have a hot lunch. And since they have a cafeteria at school, she gives me lunch money. But somebody with the initials KBB told her mother, who told Mrs. Romeo, who told my mother that I was going over to the Pig and Whistle barbecue stand at lunchtime and getting me a barbecue and a Coke. Now, first of all, this is a lie. I get cheeseburgers. Second of all, Mrs. Dot, who I admire, said she wouldn't be caught dead in any cafeteria ever since her uncle choked to death on a catfish bone in the Red Star cafeteria in Selma in 1936. And third of all, here is the menu for the school cafeteria for this week alone that they print in the Magnolia Springs paper. Monday, spaghetti and meatballs and ice cream. Tuesday, meatloaf, potato sticks, succotash, and a peach half. Wednesday, cheese wiener, rice and gravy, buttered spinach, and coconut pudding. Thursday, tuna salad, pickled beets, macaroni and cheese, and a banana. Friday, beef stew, snap beans, and Jell-O. Now you be the judge. Mama and Daddy are now fighting over some woman she thinks he's running around with. K. Bob Benson said her Mama and Daddy saw my daddy at some beer joint with a woman, but I don't believe it. Mama must have believed them, though, because when he came home late the other night, she got the gun out and told him she was going to shoot him dead. He was on the back porch holding the screen door closed with all of his might, so she couldn't get out there and get a good aim at him. But he was in a bad spot, because if he ran, she would shoot him in the back, and if he stayed where he was, there was a chance she'd shoot him right through the screen door. He was in between a rock and a hard place. He said for me to help him, so I ran in between him and Mama, since I didn't think she wanted to shoot me. I wish I had a black satin jacket. Amy Jo Snipes' brother sent her one from Korea. It has a dragon on it and everything. November the 10th. You will never believe what's happened. Harper's malt shop has burned to the ground. I'm homeless. Daddy's having a fit because the insurance is not half as much as he thought it would be. A week ago, Mama and I were up at Buddy's Cafe having dinner, and I got tired of sitting around waiting on Mama, so I left and started over to Michael's when I saw smoke coming out of the wooden shack on the side of the malt shop. A whole bunch of rags that smelled like gasoline were starting to burn. I grabbed a bucket that was in there and ran outside and filled it full of sand about 4 or 5 times. The fire was almost out, and I was hollering for my daddy, and when he got around to the side of the house and saw what I was doing, instead of being proud of me, you know what? He yelled at me to go over to Michael's and he'd take care of the rest. Michael and I were playing old maid, and just when I was sure Michael was going to be the old maid, some men ran up and started banging on the door and yelling, "Harper's is on fire." Sure enough, our place was burning again, as big as you please, and Daddy was sitting across the street drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Everybody else was running around like chickens with their heads cut off. A few minutes later, Mama came home from Buddy's, and when she saw what was happening, she just sat down in the road and started crying. I started calling Felix, and pretty soon I heard Felix's meow from under the house. I crawled under there as fast as I could, and I grabbed her. We lost everything we owned. Mr. White, who has some cottages down on the beach, let us stay in one for a while, so that's where we are living now. About a day or so after the fire, Daddy took me to the car and opened the trunk and said, "Well, look what just happens to be in the trunk." It was my tin box full of private papers and my sweetheart pillow from Jessie Legore. Mama's not speaking to Daddy at all. November the 14th. Mama left today to go live with her sister Mignon in Virginia. She told me she just couldn't stay with Daddy any more, and when I got older I would understand. She wanted me to go with her. I love my mother very much, but I can't see leaving my Daddy. The night she left, Daddy got on a real mean drunk. When I asked him to stop drinking so much, he told me to shut up and just leave him alone and to get on the bus and go to Virginia with my mother. He couldn't stand the sight of me. He was just saying that because he's upset over Mama. But it hurt my feelings anyway. But I didn't let him see me cry. I fixed him the next day, though. Before I went to school, I left him a note that said, "Billy G. Thweet called you up on the phone last night." November the 19th. I got a letter from Mama today. She says she's fine. She has a job as a waitress and will send for me whenever she can. I miss her. There's a little boy at school named Vernon Mooseburger who's bald. You wouldn't believe how cruel people can be just because he doesn't have a hair on his head. Kids call him ugly names like Cue Ball, Daddy Warbucks, and Henry after the bald boy in the cartoon funny papers. I call him Vernon. He is poor and got a disease when he was little that made all of his hair come out, including his eyebrows. Mrs. Underwood made us all write an essay on what we would like to be when we grow up. I wrote one called "Why I Want to Be Bald When I Grow Up." I said how great it would be in the summer to be able to put a cold rag on the top of your head, and when you went out, all you had to do was take a rag and polish your head a little, and if you got into a fight, nobody could pull your hair. November the 21st. Get ready for this. I was watching Our Miss Brooks with Eve Arden, Gail Gordon, and Michael Crenna when some men banged on our door and said they had found a dead woman on the beach by the pier in front of Hammer's Christian Motel. I went with Daddy to see it. The police had the place roped off and were looking at the woman with flashlights and doing a lot of mumbling that police do at this sort of thing, just like in the movies. The Hammers, who were lording it over everybody because the body had been found on their property, have a vicious grandchild named Greg. Do you know what he did when everybody's back was turned? He ran up there and took the dead woman's watch and ring right off of her. But Mrs. Hammer caught him. She marched right up to the police and said, "Here, my grandson took this off that dead woman," and handed them a ring. The minute I saw that ring, I knew who the dead woman was. It was Ruby Bates. I yelled, "I know who that dead woman is. She's Ruby Bates, and she's a friend of Claude Pistol's." The policeman said, "What did you say, little girl?" And I said, "That woman is Ruby Bates, and she's Claude's." But before I could get anything more out, Michael's mother slammed her hand over my mouth so hard I saw stars. She said for me not to mention his name under any circumstances because Claude Pistol is the meanest man in Harwan County, and there's no telling what he would do if I said he knew that woman. The papers are full of stories about the dead woman. The police said her name was Mrs. Ruby Bates. I told them so. She is survived by her sister, Mrs. Julian Wilson, who must be Opal. She'd been killed by a single bullet in the head and had been dead approximately 68 hours when the body was found. They even know what her last meal had been, peas and carrots. I sure wouldn't want my last meal to be peas and carrots. November 23rd. Mrs. Dot comes down to see me once in a while, and she sure has been acting funny lately. She wears the junior debutante pink and seafoam green barrettes all the time now, and she made me sit down and listen to a talk called Fun with Rayon that I had already heard her do in junior debutantes. Mrs. Romeo said that her dashes from Dot column last week didn't make a lick of sense. November the 24th. I am in big trouble. Yesterday at school, somebody knocked on the classroom door. Mrs. Underwood went to find out who was there, and she came back and said, "Daisy Fay, your aunt and uncle are here to see you. They're waiting for you in the car." I got all excited because it had to be my Aunt Mignon and Uncle Raymond, and I just knew Mama was with them. They must have brought her home as a surprise. But when I got out to the car, guess what? I had never seen these two people before in my life. The woman says, "You're Daisy Fay Harper, aren't you?" I said, "Yes," but by that time they'd driven off with me. She said, "You were named after a vase of daisies that were in your mother's room, weren't you?" Then I started to get nervous. And when I saw that ring on her finger, and I knew who she was, Opal, the murdered woman's sister, I started screaming that they had better stop and let me out of that car or I would tell the police. Opal said to me, "Don't be afraid, we won't hurt you." And I said to the man, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm her husband." They took me over to the Tasty Freeze and bought me a banana split, and Opal said, "We just want to talk to you about my sister Ruby. We hope you'd like to help us find her killer. We know it was Claude Pistol, and we've tried every way in the world to get a case up against him, but Claude lies and says he never knew of Ruby Bates." Ruby had told me all about Claude, though, and I warned her against ruining her reputation by going with him, but Ruby just told me not to worry. The only person who had ever seen them together was a little girl named Daisy, who lived on the beach and had been named for a vase of flowers. That's how I found you. Then they bought me a hot fudge sundae with nuts, and the man told me that his real name was Mr. Kilgore and that he was from the FBI. So I told him the whole story. Mr. Kilgore said that Claude is a dangerous man and that the FBI suspects him of a lot of murders all over the country, but they haven't been able to pin anything on him until now. All I had to do was sign a paper stating that I had seen Ruby Bates and Claude Pistol together on the afternoon of September the 21st. He said I would probably never be called to testify. That's right, I'll probably be dead. November the 25th. Daddy, Jimmy Snow, and Billy Bundy went up to the Blue Gardenia Lounge today to tell Harold Pistol to get a message to his brother Claude that if he dares to come within 100 miles of me, Daddy will kill him. Harold said for Daddy to calm down. Nothing was going to happen to anybody. Claude is in South America for good and is never returning because some men in Detroit are mad at him. When Daddy got home, he called up Mr. Kilgore, and Mr. Kilgore said, "Yes, it's true. Claude is in South America, and if he ever tries to come back, the FBI would pick him up so fast that it would make his head swim." Daddy was as happy as a clam over this news, and so was I. I'm too young to die. November 28th, 1952. Mrs. Dot took us all over to the Harwan County Fair, and we were all packed in that car like sardines. Angel Pistol had to sit in my lap, and she's the boniest little girl I have ever met. When we got there, we rode the bumper cars, and Crazy Michael crashed into everybody. Then he and Vernon Mooseburger and I rode the Ferris wheel. We also rode the Caterpillar and the Crazy Mouse. Michael kept grabbing handfuls of cotton candy off the small children's paper cones when their parents weren't looking, and in one sideshow they had a two-headed sheep in a bottle, but I think it was rubber. That was a real gyp. Then we saw the Fat Man, and we wasted our money on that one too, because Michael and I both agreed Jessie Legore had been much fatter. Then we decided to ride the merry-go-round. We had been around about 15 times when I looked out, and guess who was out there in that crowd? Claude Pistol. I nearly had a heart attack. We came around again, and he was still there, and he was staring right at me. I jumped off my horse and started running. I went over 2 of the benches where the parents sit with small children and just flew off the other side. I looked back, and there he was, coming right after me. I must have knocked down 10 people in my way out the entrance gate and on towards the parking lot. When I found Mrs. Dott's car, it was locked, and somebody was coming up behind me. I ran to the last car, which was a pickup truck, and climbed in the back and hid under some potato sacks. Then I heard someone opening car doors and shutting them. They were getting closer and closer and closer. Then all of a sudden, I heard somebody walking around my truck. But whoever it was got into the truck and drove it out of the parking lot onto the highway with me in it. All I could think of was, "Thank you, Blessed Mother," and I'm not even Catholic. Then I got to wondering, what if it was Claude Pistol's truck I had gotten in? When we stopped at an intersection, I peeked in the back window and saw it was just some old man who had a little boy with him who was sound asleep. So I started banging on the window and yelling, "Let me out of this truck." After the old man let me out, I ran all the way around the back roads and came up behind the Elite night spot. I banged and banged on the door until Peachy Wiggum answered in her nightgown. I told her she had to call my daddy and the FBI because Claude Pistol was here and was going to kill me. In about 20 minutes, Daddy and Jimmy Snow arrived. Daddy went in the next room and had a talk with Peachy. She unlocked a closet and brought out 2 paper sacks with something in them. She gave Daddy one and Jimmy Snow one. Daddy came over to me and said, "I want you to stay right here with Peachy and don't worry about anything." Peachy got a big shotgun out of the closet and put her chair right in the middle of the room and sat down. I was so tired by this time I could hardly see straight. She told me to go into her room and go to bed, that everything was going to be all right. The next morning I opened my eyes, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Then I turned and looked right into the face of Eula Sauer, that albino woman. I started hollering for Peachy to come in right away. Peachy came running with the shotgun and said, "What's the matter?" I said, "There's an albino in your bed." Then Peachy laughed because Eula Sauer was sitting up looking at me as surprised as I was to see me in her bed. Peachy said, "Honey, you got in the wrong bed." She introduced Eula and me. She's the one I heard walking around in that back room when I was up there to get Jimmy Snow. I told her that I was sorry I'd scared her, but I was real happy to meet her. I'd been wanting to for a long time. She was very nice, not scary looking at all. And guess what I found out? She works for Peachy in the colored mortuary as an undertaker. Peachy said she was the best undertaker that she'd ever hired. About 9:30, Daddy came to get me. I introduced him to Eula Sauer, the famous albino and undertaker. He thanked them for taking care of his little girl. He handed those 2 paper sacks back to Peachy, and she put them back in the closet. I asked Daddy what was in those sacks, and he said, "Never mind, just come on, we're going home." When we got in the car, I asked Daddy when I was going to have to testify against Claude Pistol, and he said, "You're not." "I'm not." "No, you're not." "Why not?" "You're just not, so don't worry about it." "Why not?" He said, "Because Claude Pistol is dead, that's why." When we got home, Mr. Kilgore from the FBI was waiting for us. Daddy turned to me and said, "Just shut up," but I hadn't even opened my mouth. Mr. Kilgore said, "Mr. Harper, we've been looking all over for you. I wanted to inform you that Claude Pistol was found shot to death up at the landing strip outside Magnolia Springs." Daddy said, "Thank God. Do you have any idea who did it?" Mr. Kilgore said, "We're pretty sure it was a gangland killing. There were about 10 bullet holes in him. We found out that he was involved with a dope ring operating out of Cuba. He said that it had been a crop duster named Jimmy Snow that had discovered the body." After Mr. Kilgore left, I looked at Daddy and he looked at me. I was wondering how he knew Claude was dead at 10 o'clock when the body hadn't even been discovered yet. But just then we heard the police sirens coming down the highway. 3 police cars skidded up in front of our house and stopped. One of the policemen said to me, "Are you all right?" I said, "I'm just fine. Why?" "A woman named Mrs. Dott is almost crazy with worry," he said. "She'd called the Harlan County Highway Patrol and the police department with some story about this little girl being kidnapped by a white slaver at the fair and had threatened to put all their names in the paper and ruin their reputations if they didn't find me. Daddy said I'm Bill Harper, her father, and maybe I can explain this misunderstanding. My little girl spent the night with a friend of hers and forgot to tell Mrs. Dott." And the policeman said, "Where were you, Mr. Harper? We had somebody here looking for you all night." Daddy said, "Well, it's a little embarrassing. Do you know a woman named Rayette Walker?" The policeman must have, because he started to laugh. He said, "Don't worry, buddy, I figured it was something like that." After they left, Daddy looked at me and I looked at him. I said, "Who's Rayette Walker?" He said, "Nobody." I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Have I ever lied to you?" I gave up. Michael and Vernon Mooseburger said Mrs. Dot made them stay at the fair for 2 hours after it closed and had everybody that worked there looking for me. Even K. Bob Benson had to go in a search party. When Michael and Vernon asked me why I went all funny and jumped off the merry-go-round before my ride was up, I said I had to go to the bathroom real bad and got a ride home because I didn't want to use a public bathroom that freaks used. Do you know what? They believed me. You should see the papers. The front page is all about Claude Pistol. They even ran a picture of Jimmy Snow pointing to the spot where he discovered the body. Jimmy sure looks like an albino in that picture. The article said that 10 bullets from a .22 caliber pistol were found in Claude's liver. Somebody was a good shot, unless they had been aiming for his heart. Claude's real name was Claude Pistol, and he had been in jail on all kinds of things, including manslaughter. Boy, am I glad he's dead. The only thing I can't figure out is how Daddy knew Claude was dead at 9:30 that morning when Jimmy didn't discover the body until 10:08. December the 6th. Today Harold Pistol brought Angel down to the house to say goodbye. They are moving away because of all the stuff that was in the papers about Claude. I told Harold I was very sorry that his brother had been killed, but that I wasn't going to lie. I also said that since Claude was trying to kill me, I wasn't as sorry as I should be, 'cause fair's fair. Harold said, "He wasn't trying to kill you, Daisy." "He wasn't?" "No, he was just looking for Angel and thought she might be with you. He would never have hurt you. You saved Angel's life." "He never thanked me for saving her life." "He couldn't. He didn't want anybody to know." "Know what?" "That Angel was his little girl. We took her after her mother was killed when she was about 6 months old." "You could have knocked me over with a feather." December 15th. I'm Mother Goose in the Christmas play. I'm so mad. Everybody in my class gets to be in their own play, but I have to be in the first and second graders. I have no choice because Mrs. Underwood told them I would. December 23. Mama is home. She's staying at the Magnolia Springs Hotel because she still isn't speaking to Daddy. And now she's up visiting Velveeta Pritchard in the colored quarters. I feel sorry for Daddy. He's very upset that Mama is here and won't even see him. He and Jimmy Snow are in the other room, tying one on. Mama told me all about her job in Virginia. She is not a waitress anymore. She got a promotion. She is now the official hostess in a very important pancake house in Charlottesville, and she can wear her own clothes instead of a waitress uniform. December 27th. The play went okay. I got the biggest hand of anybody. Mama and Daddy were careful to take turns praising me after the play so they wouldn't have to talk to each other. I was hoping they would get together, it being Christmas and all, and having a child in common, but they didn't. All Mama said to Daddy was, "How's your new friend?" "What new friend?" January the 23rd, 1953. Yesterday Daddy and I were watching the Mickey Mouse Club, and when we looked up, 2 FBI men were at the door. The short one said, "Mr. Harper, we'd like to know your whereabouts on the night of November the 5th. Daddy had an answer right away. He said he had spent the night with Rayette Walker, who lived at 212 Division Avenue, and that Jimmy Snow had been with them. The men wrote it all down and said they were sorry to have bothered us, but they had to do some routine checking. Boy, was I mad. I'm going to call on Rayette Walker tomorrow and tell her that she has broken up my mother and Daddy. January the 24th. After school I walked over to Division Avenue and found 212. It is a little white house with a front porch that looks like it's getting ready to fall down. Real low rent, as Mama would say. When Rayette Walker saw me, she looked scared and said, "Daisy Fay, what are you doing here?" She knew my name. I asked if I could come inside, and she let me. By that time I remembered I had seen her working up at Nita's Beauty Box as a hairdresser. She looks a lot like Yvonne DiCarlo, only a little heavier. When we got inside, I told her I knew she and Daddy had been fooling around. She looked real sad and said, "Daisy, your daddy has told me everything about you since you were born. I even saw you in the Christmas play." I said, "You did?" And she said, "Yes, you were wonderful." To get back on the track, I said, "If you know all that about me, how come you stole my daddy away from a perfectly good wife and made her leave?" She didn't have an answer to that one. She just said for me not to be mad at Daddy because he loved me very much and they had never meant to hurt me or Mama. Then she added, "When you grow up, maybe you'll understand," that old famous line they always give you. I made her swear she would leave my daddy alone. She said if I hated her so bad, she would. I said I did. January the 25th. Oh, brother, am I in trouble again? Daddy was so mad at me for going up to Rayette's and making her swear not to ever see him again. I think he would have killed me if Jimmy Snow hadn't been there. He and Jimmy talked for a while, and then Jimmy came in my room and said for me to go for a walk with him. After we got to the beach, Jimmy said, "Daisy, your mother and Daddy are going to get a divorce." I said, "They are not." Jimmy said, "I know you want to believe your mom is coming back, but it's just not going to happen." I said, "Even if that is true, Daddy doesn't have any business running around with some old beauty operator that is trash, and everybody says so." Then he said, "Daisy, sit down. I have something to tell you." I didn't want to sit down because of the sand fleas, but he took off his jacket and put it on the beach. He said, "I hate to see you make a mistake about Rayette you will regret. Now, I'm only going to tell you this once, and I want your word of honor that you will never ask me or anybody about it again." I said, "Yes. Now tell me." "Well, Daisy, if the police ever trace some of the bullets they found in Claude Pistol's liver to a certain woman's gun, then maybe you'll understand what a good friend she was to you and your daddy." I just sat there. I forgot about the sand fleas. I had suspected it, but now I knew for sure what had been in those paper sacks Peachy Wiggum gave Daddy the night before Claude was murdered. Rayette, Daddy, and Jimmy Snow had killed Claude Pistol trying to protect me, and Claude hadn't even been trying to kill me. January the 26th. I went into Nita's beauty box this morning and asked Rayette Walker to go with me to the mother and daughter dinner next week. She started to cry right there in the stall with her customer's head half rolled up. When I got home from school this afternoon, Daddy was as happy as he could be. Rayette must have called him up. I'll do anything to make Daddy and Jimmy happy after what they did for me. I can never repay them for as long as I live. February the 16th. This morning about 6:30, Mrs. Hammer, who owns Hammer's Christian Motel, looked out her window and saw a woman naked as a jaybird skipping up and down the beach picking up seashells. She grabbed a blanket and ran out to cover her up, and that woman was Mrs. Dot. She had reversed herself in time and thought she was a little girl again. They called an ambulance and took her to the crazy ward in Meridian. I told Daddy for us to go and get her and bring her here to live with us, but Mr. Dot had already signed the papers and there was nothing we could do. February the 20th. Sunday, Daddy and I were up at the Bonton Cafe, and Daddy kept watching Billy Bundy count his money. Now, according to Billy, to make real money in the religious game, you need a glory getter. A glory getter is someone who can make the people think that they can get them to glory. The best glory getters are little children and platinum blonde-haired women. Daddy's worried because the insurance money is almost gone, and we have another payment to make on the land where the malt shop used to be. Maybe that's why he thought up the miracle. The miracle is that I'm going to pretend to drown and then to come back from the dead as Billy Bundy's new glory getter. Daddy is just convinced he can make a machine that can shine a cross on the sky. He said we'll make a bundle. Billy Bundy is a very sharp businessman. February the 22nd. Yesterday, Daddy went to Meridian and bought himself an old movie projector. He has a little piece of plywood with a cross cut in it over the hole in front of the projector where the light comes out. Last night at about 3 o'clock in the morning, when everybody was asleep, he woke me up and we went out on the beach with an extension cord. And sure enough, when he turned it on, there was this cross shining in the sky as big as you please. Boy, is he smart. Now all he has to do is to figure out a way to get that machine to work on batteries, because on the day of the miracle, I'm going to have it in a boat, and after everybody sees the cross, I'm going to sink the boat with the machine in it so nobody can find any evidence. The miracle is set for next Tuesday. Late Tuesday night, I'm going to put on this white choir robe that Billy stole from me from his church. Then we will get the boat in the water, and I'll row out as far as I can until I can't see land anymore. Then Daddy will run up and down the beach and wake everybody up and carry on about how his little girl has drowned in the Gulf of Mexico because of his drinking. At 6:45 a.m. on the dot, I turn the machine on and pull the nail out of the hole Daddy drilled in the bottom of the boat. Daddy figures it will take about 30 minutes for the boat and the projector machine to sink, so the cross will still be on in the sky when I get to shore in my inner tube. Now once I see people, I am to let go of the inner tube and dog paddle all the way in. As soon as my feet touch bottom, I will stand up and walk out of the water with my hands in a praying position and my eyes cast upward. And Friday, I will make my first appearance after being dead at a revival meeting. It sounds good to me. March the 2nd. Well, I'm back from the dead, and you wouldn't believe what happened. It sure was cold sitting in that boat for 5 hours. To tell you the truth, I almost rowed back a couple of times, but I knew if I did, Daddy would kill me. When I finally did get to the shore, I never saw so many people in my life. Daddy grabbed me first and did a great scene, just like Cary Grant in the movie Penny Serenade when he thought he was going to lose his little girl. Then he took me straight to the house and put me in the bedroom. All day long, reporters and people kept coming, but Daddy and Billy Bundy won't let me talk to anyone until the revival meeting. March the 23rd. I'm still not sure what went wrong. Daddy rented the dance hall for the revival meeting. He rented an organ and hired Miss Ermagene Slauson to play Let Us Gather by the River. When I was brought up on the stage, he thought a song about water was best since I had been drowned. At first, everything went real well. Billy Bundy had on a black suit with a string bow tie and preached like crazy about the burning fires of hell and how God had sent this little child to lead everybody to salvation. Then he got to the part where I had been in heaven and had returned from the dead to talk to them. I entered the stage with my eyes pointed upwards, just like Dad had told me to do. People were taking my picture and screaming out things like praise the Lord and hallelujah and stuff like that. Daddy blinked the spotlight a couple of times before I got up enough nerve to speak. Then I put both my hands in the air like Daddy had told me to, and sure enough, they quieted down. I started my talk with how I had been in heaven, and that God was real nice looking, and that he and the angels had told me to come back to earth and stop my daddy from drinking, and to tell everyone how much we needed money so I could carry the Lord's work all over the whole state of Mississippi. Then I guess I got carried away with myself and forgot my planned speech. I started talking about how wrong it was to catch fish that they weren't going to eat and leave them on the pier to die, and that catfish have souls, and that I had seen a lot of them in heaven. I went on to talk about how wrong it was to be mean to colored people and albinos. I was having a real good time when all of a sudden I could feel that they were no longer listening to me. I looked down in the audience and I saw Mr. Caldwell, that man from the Bon Secours River. He came walking up the aisle carrying his crippled daughter Betty. He walked up the stairs and right on the stage and said in a real loud voice, "Let the angel of the Lord touch my child." I didn't know what he was talking about, and I would have been standing there to this day if Betty hadn't said, "Fay, help me. Put your hands on me and help me." Well, there was just something so sweet about the way she said that even though I was kind of scared to death to touch a crippled person, I went right over there and put my hands on her legs. And when I did, I felt very strange, sort of like electricity was going through my body and through my hands right onto her. The whole time I was hoping I wouldn't catch a crippling disease from Betty. My mother would kill me. I didn't know what else to do, so I said, "You better walk now," and I touched her again for a good measure. Once Mr. Caldwell let go of her, sure enough, she put one foot in front of the other and she started to walk. And after she got going real good, she was walking and running all over that stage. It was great until her daddy fell on his knees, crying and screaming and praising the angel of the Lord who had cured his little girl. When he did that, the people in the audience went crazy, and 4 or 5 of them began rolling up and down the aisles, and a lot of the others stood up and started babbling in the unknown tongue that was very popular with religious people. Oh, you should have heard them gobble, 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 gobble. Well, I was kind of enjoying that until some old woman threw her hearing aid at the stage and hit me in the head with it, screaming, I can hear, praise God, I can hear. No wonder the way everybody was yelling. All of a sudden, the whole audience was knocking over Daddy's rented chairs and was headed right up on the stage after me, hollering, heal me, heal me. Daddy always told me that Christians were dangerous, and I believed him, so I picked up my choir robe and started running. Miss Irma Jean Slauson must have gone crazy too, because at this point she began to play If I Knew You Were Coming, I'd Have Baked a Cake that isn't even a religious number. Jimmy got to me first and picked me up with one arm and ran through the crowd with me just like I was a football. Daddy was in front of him, swinging. Just as we got to the front door, someone grabbed Jimmy by the leg and he fell down. He yelled at me to keep going and get the hell out of there, so I did. It's a good thing I had on my tennis shoes under my robe, because I must have run 4 miles up that beach as fast as I could. I never even took the time to look behind me until I got to the pier. Finally, Daddy came to get me. He was all beaten up and only had half of his glasses left. He said we had to hurry because the police were after him for disturbing the peace. We turned off the road and headed towards the airfield where Claude Pistol had been killed and where Jimmy Snow was waiting for us in his plane. Just as we turned off, we heard the sirens. The highway patrol was right behind us. You should have heard one of those policemen cuss. He said, "Halt, goddammit, halt." I didn't think officers were supposed to cuss, but they do. Daddy and Jimmy and I flew all the way to Key West, Florida, dusting crops whenever we felt like it. After Jimmy got back, he called to say that Teachy Wiggum was keeping Felix for me. So anyway, here I sit in some old ugly motel in Key West, Florida. Daddy has a job running the pictures in a theater here, but this is the bad news. Mama called up and she is furious. Somebody sent her the Magnolia Springs paper, and she read about me drowning and coming back from the dead. She says that Daddy is crazy to have done such a sacrilegious thing and that I can't stay with him anymore. June 22nd, 1956. Mama died about a week after my freshman year in high school, so I won't be going back to boarding school anymore. Instead, I am back in Shell Beach with Daddy, who has taken her death pretty hard. The thing of it is, we didn't even know she was sick. I hadn't seen much of her in the past 3 years because I was staying in school for the summers too. At the funeral, I never did go look at her. I just couldn't. I knew it wasn't Mama in that coffin. That couldn't have been her in a little box like that. I've been home about a week now, and today's the first time I really felt like going out. Michael and his mother came to see me. He looks great, and he's grown up a lot. I went up to Peachy Wiggum's this afternoon. She and Eula Sauer were very glad to see me, and I sure was glad to see them. My old cat Felix is fat as a pig now and didn't even know who I am. Daddy lost the land he had, so he is running the Flamingo Motel for a man who moved back to Tupelo. I have my own motel room. Crazy old Jimmy Snow is living in the motel with Daddy. He's having a hard time getting crop dusting jobs because he keeps having accidents in his plane. He's drinking as bad as ever. He and Daddy make a fine pair. Daddy heard from Mr. Wenzel that Betty Caldwell had married a nice boy who's a dentist. They live in Meridian and have a little girl. Guess what her name is? Daisy Fay. Why in the world would someone name their child Daisy Fay if they didn't have to? Thank heavens the police never did find out who shot Claude Pistol. I've worried myself sick about it. Daddy and Jimmy Snow never say anything about the murder even when they are drunk, and I've never said a word either. Mrs. Dodd is still in the hospital. Other than that, Shell Beach is just about the same. September 21st. School started. Pickle Watkins will be my best friend for as long as I live. She has red curly hair and freckles and is the same height as I am. We can even wear the same clothes. Her family moved here from Alabama 3 years ago. When I told her my name, she said she'd heard all about me coming back from the dead and always wanted to meet me. She has a brother, Lemuel, and a little sister, Judy, who they call baby sister, and she plays in the band and wants me to be in it too. I don't even have to read music. They just need good marchers to make the band look bigger. Pickle is the first chair trombone. She's never going to get married, just like me. Maybe we can go to the same college and get an apartment together in New York. We went over to see Miss Philpott, the band director, who'll be glad to have me. All that was left, unfortunately, was the saxophone, so I had to take it. I really wanted a tuba. I saw Vernon Mooseburger and Patsy Ruth Coggins, and Amy Jo Snipes is in love. All she talks about is her boyfriend, Nathan Willie, and how she is wearing his gold football that is just as good as an engagement ring. And the worst news of all, K. Bob Benson is head majorette. October the 9th. Pickle says that we should only date senior boys. She has one on the string named Mustard Smoot. She's not in love, though. She just needs a senior to be seen with. Mary and Eugene, Mustard's friend, is going to ask me out so we can double date. Our first football game was a disaster. During the first quarter, Vernon Mooseburger's helmet flew off when he was tackled. It hit Mudge Fairclough, our best cheerleader, in the right knee, and she had to be carried off the field. Vernon should have worn cotton in his helmet to help keep it on his head. Poor Vernon. Now he just won't talk to anybody. During halftime, the band had to stand perfectly still for what seemed like forever while K. Bob Benson in her trashy blue sequin majorette outfit did her tricks, twirling 2 batons at one time, throwing up her baton and catching it behind her back. She didn't even miss a once. October the 11th. We went out with Mustard and Mary and Eugene to the Hub Drive-In to see a double feature, The Earth versus Flying Saucers, and Shack Out on 101 with Terry Moore and Frank Lovejoy. We were having a good time until Shack Out on 101 came on the screen. The boys were drinking beer and thought that Shack Out was so funny that they giggled and screamed every time anybody in the movie said it. Pickle and I have decided to write Terry Moore, the actress, and tell her that she's been in too many movies about crime and shoplifting. We would like for her to make a film that is funny, maybe a musical, because all those crime movies might begin to affect her personality. October the 18th. Pickle got into terrible trouble for spending the night with me. Her daddy was waiting for her when she came home from school and accused her of being with the boy. The only reason I found out is that when we were dressing for Jim, I saw huge red welts on her back. She said it was nothing, but I asked her sister about it, and she said that her father is always beating them if he thinks they've been with boys. November 21st. We got dates to the homecoming dance with Mustard and Mary and Eugene, and Amy Jo Snipes is going to make Nathan marry her during Christmas vacation, and we all have to be in her wedding. I cut out an ad out of the paper today for the Dale Carnegie course. It says that Dale can turn you into a confident and forceful speaker. I talked to Jimmy Snow, who agreed to loan Vernon the money for the course. I told him to consider it as an investment. Vernon Mooseburger could turn out to be President of the United States or something. You never know. When I came home from school today, Daddy had some woman in his motel room. She answered the door and said he was asleep. Her name is Ruth, and she looks like an old drunk to me. She's even worse than Rayette Walker. November the 24th. Pickle decided we need to become Rainbow Girls because all the senior girls are in it. Your daddy has to be a Mason or your mother has to be in the Eastern Star, so she talked Patsy Ruth Coggins into getting her mother to sponsor us. I asked Patsy Ruth what the Rainbow Girls do. She said it was just pretty easy. All you do is sing hymns. Just what I want. Thanks a lot, Pickle. We bought our formals for the homecoming dance. Pickle's is a pretty aqua net with a big satin bow, and mine is a white ballerina-length net dress with little red polka dots. We had to buy strapless bras. Pickle's has a lot of padding. Everybody knows Amy Jo Snipes is going to be the homecoming queen because she's getting married, and Nathan is the captain of the football team and a senior. November the 26th. Guess what? We lost the homecoming game. It's all Michael Romeo's fault. He made a touchdown in the first half and turned around to see if everybody was looking, and he ran right into the goal post and hurt his throwing arm so bad they had to take him out of the game. He was the only one on the team who could pass. And our band show stunk. It was all about Thanksgiving, and we formed a turkey, but it looked a lot like a chicken. Guess who showed up at the homecoming dance? Crazy old Jimmy Snow. He said he just wanted to see me in my formal. I tried to get him to dance with Miss Philpott, but he wouldn't. He said that I was the prettiest girl there. The strapless bra I bought was the most uncomfortable thing I ever had to wear in my life. That with the girdle. All I can remember is the pain. December the 4th. We attend Rainbow Girls every week down at the Masonic Hall on top of Tally's furniture store. We have to sit outside while everybody else goes into the secret meeting, though. All those Rainbow Girls have secrets. I can't wait until we are initiated to find out what they are. I came up with a way for us to make a fortune. It came to me the other day while I was up in the plain crop dusting with Jimmy Snow. Why not take a picture of a farm from the air and put the picture in the paper under the heading Mystery Farm? When the people who own it recognize the picture and call in, we can sell them the picture of their farm for $10 to use on Christmas cards and things. People will just eat that up. We might even be able to make enough money so we could buy a car and get our own apartment. I would feel better if Pickle was out of that house. She won't tell me, but her daddy is still beating the daylights out of her. I can see the marks. Lemuel said she sasses him, and it makes matters worse. She's very brave. December the 10th. Yesterday Jimmy and Pickle went up in his plane and flew all over Magnolia Springs taking pictures. We have 15 mystery farms and 1 mystery filling station. They turned out great except for one thing. Dumb Pickle didn't find out whose farm she took pictures of. They're a mystery to us, too. Can you believe someone would be that dumb? Sometimes I wonder about her. December 28th. Well, Miss Amy Jo Snipes is now officially Mrs. Nathan Willie, and I hope she'll live. That was the first wedding I've ever been to, and to tell you the truth, I don't care if I never go to another one. Christmas was gruesome. Every place was closed. Daddy, Jimmy Snow, and I stayed home and watched the Perry Como Christmas special with Rosemary Clooney. We missed Mama a lot. I wish Daddy and Jimmy could make it through one night without getting drunk. I think they're both alcoholics. I read an article in Reader's Digest, and it said the alcoholic is the last one to admit it. I'm going to try to get them to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, or they're both going to wind up in a rescue mission. January the 8th, 1957. I never wanted to be a rainbow girl. It was Pickle's idea. We had to wear evening gowns for the initiation, and I had to buy a new strapless bra. We waited outside the secret room at the Masonic Hall while they voted on us. Pickle and I had 5 sand crabs apiece in a handkerchief. I made Pickle promise that if we did get in that secret room, we would throw them on Patsy Ruth Coggins for being so silly. Finally, this big senior girl, Becky Bolden, came out to get us. She was the sister of Faith, our conductress in our journey to the end of the rainbow. You should have seen the inside of that room. They had stars and rainbows on the wall, a huge cardboard Eastern Star, and in the middle was a stand with an open Bible on it. They sang Onward Christian Soldiers and marched us all around the room in front of some big chairs where these dumb girls were sitting with crowns on their heads. Our conductress made us stop at each one, and she would say, "This is the station of the Sister of Hope." She took us in front of the Sister of Love and the Sister of the Moon. Oh, they had sisters of everything you could think of. A group of old Eastern Star ladies were standing in the corner with their hands over their hearts, and after we had marched around some more and stopped at the stations again, the sisters said some kind of mumbo-jumbo, and the first one said, "What seek you here?" And the Sister of Faith, our conductress, said, "We travel in search of a pot of gold, which ancient tradition says is at the end of the rainbow." I figured they must keep all their secrets in the pot I saw over in the corner of the room. I couldn't wait to see what was in it. When we stopped in front of the worthy advisor, she asked us if we would make our town a nicer place in which to live. We said we would, and I dropped my first sand crab right by Patsy Ruth Coggins' feet. They led us around again. I think we had to promise to be virgins and in the time of war kiss the soldiers goodbye or something or another. I was too busy dropping my sand crabs to listen much. Finally we got up to the pot of gold. This old woman in a white evening gown was standing there, and she said, "My dear girls, I am happy to welcome you into our assembly." She lifted the top of the secret pot and was getting ready to show us what was in there when all of those Eastern Star women saw the sand crabs and started screaming and picking up their skirts and running all over the room like chickens with their heads cut off. The Sister of Faith grabbed us and threw us out of the room and slammed the door in our faces. Half the school isn't speaking to Pickle and me. Those rainbow girls are supposed to be gentle and meek, but they've called us some of the ugliest names you have ever heard, including daughters of Satan. March the 12th. Daddy and Jimmy Snow attended 2 Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and I am proud of them. They both look better, and they say they feel better. Things are looking up. April the 1st. I think K. Bob Benson ought to pay for my dentist, but she says she isn't going to because I should have gotten out of her way. We were marching in the Mardi Gras parade in New Orleans, and K. Bob Benson was showing off. Every time we stopped, she did all of her stupid baton tricks. Once when Miss Philpott gave her the whistle to march, she marched, but her baton came down and hit my saxophone and chipped my other front tooth. I could kill her. April the 10th. Last night before we went to the drive-in, Marion and Eugene stopped by the pool hall to get some money from his brother. When he came out, he said, "Guess who is in there shooting pool?" I said, "Who?" "Your daddy and Jimmy Snow." Sure enough, they were in there drinking beer. I am disgusted with both of them. It turns out they only went to Alcoholics Anonymous one time, and Daddy made Jimmy leave, saying he wasn't going to stand up in front of a bunch of reformed drunks and give his name and say I'm an alcoholic. I give up. Pickle told me the worst story about these two people parked in Lover's Lane in the town where she came from. They were sitting there smooching when on the radio it said there was a sex maniac with a hook on one end of his arm that had escaped and was running around loose. Well, the girl got real scared and wanted to go, but the boy wanted to stay. They had a big fight over it. Finally, the boy got mad and drove off, and when they got home, he opened the door, and there was a hook hanging from the handle. May 22nd. The theme of the senior prom this year was red sails in the sunset, and the crepe paper decorations were red and orange. Everybody said Pickle and I looked beautiful. But after the prom, we were eating breakfast over at the hotel when all of a sudden in walked Pickle's daddy, who picked her up by the arm and said, "Okay, young lady, let's go," and practically dragged her out of the door. We didn't know what to do. I am sure Pickle was embarrassed to death. Poor Mustard just sat there. He was so furious, he was about to cry. May 29th. Do you know that I failed algebra? On top of that, I failed civics, home ec, and driver's education. I didn't even know I was failing civics. I worked so hard passing Spanish that it slipped up on me. They don't have summer school here, so I'm going to have to go to Jackson and stay with my grandmother Pettibone so I can be a junior with Pickle next year. I could just kill myself. Pickle and I were planning to have so much fun this summer. We were going to get a deep tan and peroxide our hair and everything. January 22nd, 1958. I had been in summer school 2 months when Pickle stopped writing me. I sent her letter after letter asking what was wrong, but never heard a word. About a month later, Patsy Ruth Coggins wrote and told me that Pickle was pregnant. How Pickle could let that happen, I'll never understand. We were supposed to go to New York together. No matter what, I'm going to get out of Mississippi as soon as I can. Daddy and Jimmy Snow and I are living in Hattiesburg now. The man who owned the motel Daddy was running fired him because he rented a room to some colored people, and the White Citizens Council found out about it and came down and shot out all the windows. Daddy took a lease on a beer joint here called Johnny's, and Jimmy is still crop dusting whenever he can. Our apartment house is called Milner Court. My room is a screened-in porch. I hope we can move soon. The school I'm going to is Blessed Sacrament Academy, and the catechism teacher, Father Stevens, is driving me crazy to get me to become a Catholic. February the 3rd. Grandma Pettibone hit the jackpot at bingo and sent me $15. There is a theater here called the Azalea Street Playhouse where they put on live plays just a block from where we live, so I went over to buy myself a ticket to see a show. While I was in the lobby, I overheard this man saying that the spotlight worker had gotten mad and quit and that they had to have somebody for the show that night. I told him I could run a spotlight because my father and grandfather were spotlight workers and had taught me, which was a lie. They never taught me, but it always looked pretty easy to me. I was right, it is easy. All you have to do is point it and turn a knob to make the light bigger or smaller. After the show that night, the director of the theater, Professor Teasley, came up to the light booth and said that I had done a wonderful job, so I am now the official spotlight worker. They don't pay anything, but I can see all the shows for free. February the 19th. My new friend, Mr. Cecil, is a famous hat designer here and is the costume designer for the theater. He's tall and skinny and has dyed blonde hair and is the funniest person I've ever met. There are 10 young boys that work with him at his hat salon, and everyone calls them the Cecilettes. They are a riot. We go out drinking together after the show. Mr. Cecil doesn't usually like girls, but I'm an exception. He thinks I'm pretty, and he's going to help me dress better and fix my hair. It nearly killed me when he plucked my eyebrows, but I do look a lot better. The next play we are doing is The Crucible, which is about witches in Salem, Massachusetts. Mr. Cecil is just sick about it. He says the costumes are so dull. March the 11th. Tootie, Helen, and Dolores are secretaries at work at the theater. Since they all want husbands, I took them over to Daddy's bar, hoping one of them would like Daddy. They didn't like Daddy so much, but they thought Jimmy Snow was the cutest thing they'd ever seen. Jimmy's so shy that he wouldn't even talk to them. Mr. Cecil and I are writing a funny sketch for the cast party. He plays a witch, and I interview him at home, just like the TV show, person to person. March the 16th. We did our sketch at the cast party for The Crucible, and it went over great. Professor Teasley said I could be in the next play. It's called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Mr. Cecil advised me to hold out for a big part. I want the lead, the one Elizabeth Taylor played in the movie, so I am practicing my diction. March the 21st. Professor Teasley assigned the parts in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof today. He says there are no small parts, just small actresses. I think he's dead wrong. Playing the part of a colored maid with only one line, "Storms a-comin'," is a small part, no matter what you say. I had more lines as Mother Goose. April the 9th. Today after school I went over to Daddy's bar, and there sat Pickle's brother, Lem Watkins. He's been in the Army for 8 months now and is about ready to go to Germany for 2 years. When he heard Daddy was running a bar in Hattiesburg, he decided to look me up. We had a few beers, and he told me what had happened. Pickle had been home alone one Saturday afternoon when her daddy came in and began screaming at her and accusing her of going all the way with Mustard. He started hitting her and calling her names. Then he dragged her into the back room and raped her. When Lem got home and found her all beaten and bleeding, he got a gun and went after his father to kill him, but he never found him. When Pickle found out she was pregnant, Mustard married her. Why does somebody like that go on living and somebody like my mother, who never heard anybody, die? April the 23rd. Professor Teasley is putting me in the next play called Yellow Jack, about the war against yellow fever at the Panama Canal. I play an English noblewoman who comes to the Panama Canal to visit her father and her boyfriend, who are both doctors. And while she is there, she comes down with yellow fever and lets her father and her boyfriend use her as a guinea pig and give her the serum that they've been working on. That way she can die knowing she has done something to help medical science. My death scene is 15 minutes long. This is my big chance. May the 1st. I am a big hit. This is my very first professional review. At last night's performance, all the players were especially good, but the performance of Miss D. Fay Harper as the doomed Cecily Bundridge was one of the finest performances this reviewer has seen on the local boards for a long time. Her timing was superb, and as she clutched her throat and waved goodbye to her father and her bereaved lover for the last time, not a dry eye was to be found in the audience. But the best news of all is that the play's of such historical interest that it was picked up to tour all over Mississippi this summer. August 28th. Well, I'm back from the tour. I died of the dreaded yellow fever in 23 counties and was a hit in every one of them. The play went to Magnolia Springs, and Mrs. Underwood came and brought all of her 6th graders. I had to talk to them and tell them I had once been a student of Mrs. Underwood years ago. She looks the same, only a little older. September the 16th. We had to move into another apartment. The one we had is too expensive. We are living in the basement of this Christian Science woman's home, and it's full of pipes. I've hit my head about 10 times already. Jimmy Snow knocked himself out the other night going to the bathroom. It may be cheaper, but it's dangerous. November the 4th. Do you know who is going to be in our next play, pal Joey? Ray Lane, the boy singer who I liked so many years ago in Shell Beach, the one who sang at the Blue Gardenia Lounge. He's 22 and is singing with a group of 3 other guys called the Four Jacks, and he's broken up with his old girlfriend. I've never heard anybody with a better voice. I like him much better than Eddie Fisher. He still has curly hair and long eyelashes. It's fate that he's in the show. I'm probably in love. November the 18th. Ray and I are dating now. I knew it would happen this way. Everyone loves him, especially in his sailor outfit in the show. Offstage, he wears plaid shirts with buttons on the collars, white wool socks with loafers, and his pants are always pressed. He smells good all the time, and he is the best kisser that ever lived. I never understood why people like to do that until now. Sometimes after the show we go down to this nightclub called Canebrake, and when they ask him to sing, he dedicates Because of You to me, and he stares right at me until I think I'm just going to faint. I still can't believe he's my boyfriend. When he is a big star, we'll live in New York, and he'll be on the Ed Sullivan Show, or have a show of his own. December 28th. This is the best Christmas I have ever had. I gave Ray 3 sweaters, a tie, an ID bracelet, and a record of Johnny Mathis singing I'll Be Home for Christmas. I gave his little brother Bobby some paints and Mrs. Lane a mirror and brush set. They gave me some fuzzy slippers and a flannel nightgown. Ray's present was just a box of candy, but I didn't care. Then Ray poured us all a glass of champagne to celebrate, and when I looked in my glass, there was an engagement ring. I never dreamed he was going to do that. I was staying at their house that night, so we all got into our pajamas and I put on my nightgown. Finally, Mrs. Lane and Bobby went to bed. I couldn't wait to grab Ray and just kiss him to death. I wanted him to stay with me all night, but he said he shouldn't. He said that the way I was kissing him that we might get into trouble. I didn't care, but he told me that he had promised Jimmy Snow he wouldn't touch me. I could have killed Jimmy Snow with a hatchet 6 times. But what Jimmy Snow doesn't know can't hurt him. Finally, Ray agreed. February the 16th. Yesterday, Tootie and Dolores asked me what my pattern was. I didn't know what they were talking about. It's what kind of silverware you want. They said you have to have a pattern when you get married, and you must go down to the store and pick out the one you like. That way people can come in and ask what your pattern is. So I made Mr. Cecil go downtown and help me pick one. He's crazy about silverware. His choice has grape handles, and it's called cornucopia. There's a lot to do in order to get married. Jimmy Snow is acting like a grouch ever since I got engaged. All he does is sit around and drink and watch the television set. Do you believe that a grown man's favorite show is Howdy Doody? April the 7th. Ray and his group are going to Panama City, Florida for a month's engagement at the Lotus Club, but I have to stay here so I can graduate. This will be the first time we've ever been separated. I know I'm going to be miserable while he's gone. May 22nd. It seems that Anne, Ray's old girlfriend, showed up at Panama City, and they've gotten back together. He wrote that he would always love me, but he had never really stopped loving her either. So it wouldn't be fair to me because I was so great, and he is so sorry, and so on and so on and so on. P.S. I graduated, and I got a watch. June the 17th. Mr. Cecil came over to the apartment and told me he was tired of me sitting on my behind feeling sorry for myself. He says he's getting me to New York if he has to kill me, and he's entered me in the Miss Mississippi contest so I can try and win a scholarship to study acting at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in Manhattan. We're going to write the funniest talent number ever. We sat down and figured out I need $500 to get my teeth fixed, buy a real pretty gown and a bathing suit, and pay my way to Tupelo where they have the Miss Mississippi pageant. One of the Cecilettes has a secret friend at the television station here, and he found out they're looking for a weather girl. He's going to set up an audition for me. June the 24th. I got the job at the TV station. I am the new weather girl on the morning show. All I have to do is stand up at 6:30 a.m., fix the weather map, and stand there for 3 minutes to tell everybody what the weather's going to be. I don't know a thing about weather, but the other weather girl said for me not to worry, just to remember it always moves to the east. They have a big weather board that has these cardboard pictures of things like snow and rains and clouds you can move wherever you want. The job is real easy. All I do is move the 5 o'clock weather girl's weather a few inches to the right. When it all winds up on the East Coast, I just start it back in California. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about Ray, but at least Jimmy Snow is his old self again. July the 1st. Mr. Cecil and I are busy with my talent number for the Miss Mississippi contest. I came up with a character who's a cross between Mrs. Dot and Grandma Pettibone. I call her Susie Sweetwater. I wear a funny hat with flowers and some funny glasses with jewels all over them. I pretend she has a TV show and use an exaggerated Southern accent and act real ditzy. I just hope Amy Jo Snipes doesn't hear my number. I took a lot of the stuff out of her wedding announcement. July the 3rd. I am very late with my period, and I am scared shitless. July the 11th. I asked Tootie if you could get pregnant the first time you did it, and she said yes, it happens all the time. How could I have been so stupid? July 12th. I placed a person-to-person call to Peachy Wiggum and told her what had happened. She said for me to get down to her as soon as I could. I am leaving tomorrow right after I finish doing my weather report. God bless Peachy Wiggum. July 15th. I must have changed my mind about 100 times about whether or not to go through with it. By the time the bus arrived in Magnolia Springs, I was a nervous wreck. I went to the bathroom at the filling station and put some cold water on my face and sat down on the floor. Then I combed my hair and used the bathroom. And guess who isn't pregnant? Me. I couldn't wait to tell Peachy, but when I got to the Elite night spot, only Eula Sauer was there. She laughed her head off. She thinks I scared myself so bad I probably stopped my own self from having a period. I spent the night and we had a wonderful time. Peachy has the best 50-year-old bourbon in the world. Peachy wouldn't tell me who the person who would have performed the operation, but on my way home on the bus it dawned on me that the person was Peachy Wiggum herself. That's why she hadn't been there when I arrived. She was down at the mortuary getting things ready. Years ago, Daddy had told me the reason she never got arrested was because she knew a secret about the sheriff's daughter. Now I know what that was. If only Pickle could have gotten to her. July the 12th. I got fired from my job as the weather girl for missing one of the biggest floods in the Midwest in 25 years because all my weather was in California. So I have a new job at the A to Z rental company making $75 a week. I sit in a big warehouse and answer the phone, and if anyone comes in, I rent them whatever they want. We have everything: hospital and sick room supplies, beds, party supplies, even artificial legs and arms. Mr. Cecil and I are going down to Gamble's department store as soon as we can and buy me a white evening gown for the pageant and a white bathing suit as well. Everything has to be white, according to the Miss Mississippi contest rules. Mr. Cecil has been teaching me to walk because the judges judge you on your posture. I go around with a book on my head all the time, and I'm getting pretty good at it. Do you know that they have bedpans made just for men? July the 24th. Daddy had to have the money. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't let him lose the lease on the bar. He tried to borrow all over town, but nobody would give him a penny. I'm sure he'll pay it back. Besides, I can always go in the contest next year or something. A year is nothing. July 26th. When Jimmy Snow got home from his crop dusting job and found out I had given Daddy all my money, he was furious. He screamed, "How in the hell could you be so stupid as to give your daddy your money?" I told him whatever Daddy did, he was still my father and that I owed it to him. He said, "You don't owe that rotten son of a bitch anything," and before I thought, I said, "He killed Claude Pistol, didn't he?" That was the first time I had ever broken my word and mentioned it since I was 11. I was real sorry I had. Jimmy looked at me strange and said, "What?" I said, "Listen, Jimmy, let's just forget about it, okay?" "Wait a minute. I'm not going to forget it. What the hell are you talking about?" "I know who killed Claude, so let's just leave it at that, all right?" "Who do you think killed him?" You and Daddy and Rayette. You told me so yourself." He looked at me like I was crazy and said, "Oh, my God, you didn't believe that story I told you about Rayette Walker, did you?" "Of course I did." "Daisy, your daddy and I never killed anybody." "Of course you did. I saw the sacks with the guns you got from Peachy Wiggum. I even saw Daddy bring them back the next day, so you can just stop pretending, Jimmy." "Daisy, there weren't guns in those sacks. That was 2 bottles of bootleg whiskey your daddy and I bought off of Peachy and took up to Rayette's house. He just brought those empty bottles back in those sacks." "Wait a minute. How else would Daddy have known about Claude being dead before the police told him?" "Daisy, I went up to the airstrip to get something out of the plane that morning, and I found Claude and called your daddy over at Rayette's house and told him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But you told me the bullets were from Rayette's gun." "My God, Daisy, I was half drunk that night, and your daddy put me up to telling you that stupid story so he could go on seeing Rayette without you having a fit over it. I never thought you actually believed it." I said, "Of course I believed it." Then he started to cry and kept repeating how sorry he was, that that stupid story was just a joke. I felt like someone had kicked me in the stomach. I don't want to see either one of them again. August the 1st. I have been living at the YWCA and eating at Morrison's cafeteria. After work yesterday, when I walked into the lobby, there sat Jimmy Snow. He grabbed me by the arm and said, "Your daddy has had a heart attack and is not expected to live, and we have to go." We ran out and got in the truck. Jimmy said that they had him over at the bar because he had been in too bad a shape to move. It was the longest ride in my life. I kept thinking I would never forgive myself if Daddy died before I had a chance to tell him I loved him. When we pulled up at the bar, I jumped out and ran in, but it was pitch dark. I yelled, "Daddy, where are you?" And then all of a sudden the lights came on and about 20 people screamed, "Surprise!" And there was my daddy standing right in the middle of 'em, and there wasn't a thing the matter with him. I was so glad to see him alive and so shocked that I started to cry. Everybody was there, Mr. Cecil and the Cecilettes, Tootie, Helen, Dolores, Professor Teasley. They all started singing, for she's a jolly good fellow. On the wall was this big sign that read, "Miss Mississippi Pageant or Bust." After that they made me sit down, and Mr. Cecil went behind the curtains in the back room. Daddy turned on a spotlight he had borrowed, and Mr. Cecil came back out in a red sequin jacket and bow tie with a huge book that had Daisy Fay Harper written on it and said, "Settle down, Daisy Fay Harper, because this is your life," and everyone applauded. "Do you remember this person? You haven't seen her since you were 12 years old." Then a woman's voice came from the back room. "Daisy, the last time we met was in Shell Beach in 1953. I couldn't think of who it was. Then Tootie put on a record of Jane Froman's singing "I'll Walk Alone," and I knew who it was. Betty Caldwell, the crippled girl I had healed. She came in and grabbed me, and she looked great. Mr. Cecil escorted her to a chair and announced, "Now a special person you have never met, Daisy Fay. Say hello to Daisy Fay the Second." Then this little girl ran out and kissed me and handed me an envelope. She was Betty's little girl, who they had named after me. Inside the envelope was a note that said, "This entitles Miss Daisy Fay Harper the First to have 2 chipped teeth fixed free of charge." Betty had married a dentist and had arranged for a friend of his to do it. The next voice was a man's. "Daisy, are you still eating all those hot fudge sundaes and banana splits?" Tootie put on the theme music from Gangbusters. It was Mr. Kilgore, the man from the FBI. He gave me a check for $50 signed by the FBI for services rendered and wished me good luck. Then Mr. Cecil said, "The next guest needs no introduction." And all of a sudden I heard a woman scream, "Bingo!" and I knew who it was. It was Grandma Pettibone. I was so happy to see her that I started to cry again. Grandma had bought me underwear. Then the theme music from The King and I came on, and this deep booming voice said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. Boy, do I have a wig for you." It was Vernon Mooseburger with a wig, and he even had false eyebrows. He kissed me and presented me with a certificate for 10 free lessons with Dale Carnegie, where he is now an executive. After he went over and sat down, the music started again, this time with the Blue Danube Waltz. A very familiar voice said, "Remember, Daisy, nothing succeeds more than personal charm." It was Mrs. Dot. She came running in, and I grabbed her and started crying again. She has been out of the hospital for 3 years and is teaching drama at the girls' school in Gulfport, Mississippi, and looks just the same. Her gift was a complete set of Shakespeare's works bound in leather. Tootie did a drum roll, and Mr. Cecil said, "And now, last but not least, a very special mystery guest, all the way from Birmingham, Alabama, who wouldn't be here tonight if it hadn't been for you." This pretty girl walked in, and the minute I saw her ears, I knew it was Angel Pistol all grown up. Her mother and daddy were here with her, and they gave me a check for $100. After that, they rolled out a big table with all kinds of presents on it. Mr. Cecil and the Cecilettes bought me a whole new traveling outfit with shoes and hat and purse. Tootie and Dolores had bought me a bathing suit, which the Cecilettes had been up all night covering with white sequins. It's got to be the most fantastic bathing suit in the world. Jimmy Snow gave me $75, and Professor Teasley gave me $100. Mrs. Underwood and her 6th graders sent me a good luck note, and Peachy Wiggum and Eula Sauer made me coat hangers with cloth on them and wrote a sweet letter. We stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning and had a ball. That party is the nicest thing that has ever happened to me in my whole life. Daddy and Jimmy and I leave for Tupelo the first thing in the morning. I love everybody in the world. August 21st. I am Miss Mississippi. I still can't believe it. I'm going to Atlantic City in 15 days and will be in the Miss America contest. Jimmy Snow is going to rename his plane the Miss Mississippi and is going to dust crops all next week in my honor. Daddy painted a big sign over the bar that says Official Headquarters of Miss Mississippi. You'd be surprised how people treat me now. I was even invited to the Hattiesburg Country Club on the 26th for a dinner in my honor by the Junior League. I'm going to take Daddy and Jimmy Snow. August the 25th. The hospital called Thursday. Jimmy Snow died at 5:47 that morning of a broken neck. His plane crashed in Madison County on Wednesday. Daddy and I went down to get him and bring him home. We buried him this afternoon. Nobody was at the funeral except for Mr. Cecil and a few men from the bar who had come to be pallbearers. Daddy has taken it pretty hard. When they put Jimmy in the ground, he just stood there and cried like a baby. Jimmy was the best friend he ever had. I think he was the best friend I ever had, too. I don't know what it's going to be like without him. I asked Daddy why he thought Jimmy had never married and had children. He looked at me real strange and said, "You're the only person he ever really loved, Daisy. Didn't you know that?" No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. September the 3rd. I'm all packed. I leave for Atlantic City in the morning. I don't know what's going to happen to me or if I will ever come back, but I do know I owe a lot of people a lot of things, and I promise I won't come back until I'm somebody. And I won't. Dear listener, what you have just heard really did happen to me. Or maybe it didn't. I'm not sure, but it really doesn't matter because it's true.